The night air is heavy with the scent of pine, and the faint, smoky whisper of campfires glowing in the distance. High on a windswept hill, Bor, Chieftain of the Edain, stands alone beneath a sky ablaze with stars, his thoughts as vast as the darkness stretching before him. Below, his people sleep, exhausted from their long journey, their trust in him unshaken even as the weight of leadership presses upon his shoulders. Every rustle of leaves, every shift in the wind, carries the unspoken promise of danger. And then, a sound, the undergrowth parts, and a scout emerges, breathless, his eyes wide with urgency. Orc Raiders are near. In that moment, Bor's fingers tighten around his spear, the cool metal biting into his palm as the fate of his tribe hangs in the balance. Wherever you are tonight, whether curled beneath blankets or listening beneath a sky of your own, we'd love to know, what time does your journey into rest begin? Let us know in the comments below, and let's weave our stories together across the miles. There's something timeless about nights like these, isn't there? The way the world grows quiet, how the stars seem to whisper secrets only the weary can hear. Tonight, we step into one of those whispered tales, a story of courage, of a leader's burden, and the thin line between safety and storm. Close your eyes for a moment. Can you feel it? The crisp bite of the wind, the distant crackle of firewood, the weight of a decision that could change everything. This is the world of Bor, a man whose name means steadfast in the tongue of his people. His story is one of resilience, of a love for his tribe so fierce it could light the darkest night. But it's also a story of shadows of the creeping dread that comes when danger lurks just beyond the firelight. As we settle into this tale together, let the rhythm of the words carry you, like the steady footsteps of a scout returning home. The night is long and the road ahead uncertain, but here, in this moment, we are safe. Let's begin. Bor raises a hand, his fingers curling slowly into a fist, the signal his warriors know well. No shouts, no clanging steel, only the quiet shuffle of boots against earth as his fighters gather, their faces hard in the flickering firelight. Spears ready, he murmurs, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. But keep the camp at peace. Behind him, the soft laughter of children carries from the tents, blissfully unaware of the threat creeping through the forest. He motions to two scouts, lean, swift figures who melt into the shadows without a sound. Track them, count their numbers, but do not engage. Every step must be measured now. One misstep, and the night could drown in blood. The elders wait beneath the gnarled oak, their faces lined with years of war and wisdom. Bor crouches beside them, the scent of damp soil and old leather filling his nose. If we strike first, one whispers, we risk leading them straight to our families. Another strokes his beard, eyes distant. And if we wait, dawn may come too late. Bor's jaw tightens. He remembers the last time hesitation stole lives, the screams, the smoke, the empty spaces at the feast tables afterward. His fingers trace the scar along his ribs, a reminder carved by an orc blade. The wind shifts, carrying the faintest metallic tang. The orcs are closer now. Bor closes his eyes, listening to the night. Somewhere beyond the trees, a twig snaps. The choice hangs before him, heavy as a stone. Attack under cover of darkness, or fortify and pray the sunrise brings safety. His people's breath, their dreams, their very futures rest on this moment. And as the stars wheel silently overhead, Bor knows the weight of a chieftain is not in the crown he wears, but in the silence between heartbeats, where every decision is a thread in the tapestry of survival. The forest breathes around them, each rustling leaf a potential threat, as Bor and his hunters move like shadows between the ancient trees. The scent of damp earth and rotting bark fills the air, masking the stench of orc filth that grows stronger with every step. Ahead, firelight flickers through the underbrush, crude torches jammed into the ground, their glow illuminating hunched figures gathered around a gutted deer. The orcs' laughter is jagged, their voices like stones grinding together. Bor's hand tightens around his spear, the wood smooth and familiar against his palm, but he does not raise it. Not yet. Haleth shifts beside him, his breath shallow with barely contained fury. They're drunk, he hisses, fingers twitching toward his knife. We could end them before they even. Bor's grip on his shoulder is iron. Look again, he murmurs. Beyond the firelight, shapes move in the gloom, too many, too organized. A snare, then. The orcs' raucous celebration is a lure, their carelessness a carefully set trap. Bor's blood runs cold. Had they rushed in, his men would now be encircled, cut off from retreat. The wind carries a new sound, the creak of a bowstring being drawn somewhere to their left. Bor's muscles tense, every instinct screaming to charge or flee, but he forces stillness into his bones. One wrong move, and the forest will erupt in violence. He meets Haleth's eyes, sees the understanding dawning there. Courage is not always a blade's edge. Sometimes it is the patience to let the moment pass. With a slow, deliberate gesture, Bor signals the retreat. The hunters melt backward, their footsteps silent as snowfall, leaving the orcs to their feigned merriment. Above them, the branches weave a net of shadows, hiding their escape. Bor's pulse thrums in his throat, not from fear, but from the terrible clarity of what might have been. The path ahead is darker now, the threat more cunning than they'd guessed, but his people's lives are still his to protect, and so he will, not with reckless steel, but with the quiet, unyielding will of a leader who knows the cost of both action and restraint. The night stretches on, heavy with unshed blood, and somewhere in the distance, an owl cries, a mournful sound, like a warning too late to heed. A twig snaps too loud, too close. The sound cuts through the night like a blade, and Bor's breath stills in his chest. Yellowed orc eyes gleam in the firelight as they turn toward the noise, nostrils flaring as they sniff the air for prey. Every muscle in Bor's body tenses, his fingers hovering just above the hilt of his knife. One wrong move, one misplaced breath, and the night will erupt in violence. His men are statues beside him, their faces half lost in shadow, their bodies coiled like springs. The moment stretches thin as spider silk, until a howl pierces the darkness. Not the guttural cry of orcs, but something wilder, older, wolves or something worse. The orcs' heads jerk up, their ragged ears twitching. Fear flashes across their brutish faces. Even they know the terrors that stalk these woods after dark. With grunts and snarls, they scatter, crashing through the underbrush like startled deer. The forest exhales around Bor, but the reprieve is fragile. Haleth leans in, his whisper barely audible. Now, while they are distracted, Bor's mind races. They could slip away, vanish into the night like mist. Safety lies in retreat. But the orcs' camp is vulnerable now. Their defense is broken by panic. Strike fast, and they might end this threat before it reaches their families. The weight of the choice presses down on him, each heartbeat a drum, counting down to action. Then another sound, not a howl this time, but a low, rhythmic chanting from deeper in the woods. The hair on Bor's neck rises. That's no wolf. That's no accident. The forest itself seems to hold its breath, as if even the ancient trees recognize the danger. Bor's hand drops to his side, his decision made. Fall back, he murmurs. But mark this place. Whatever hunts tonight isn't done with them, or us. As they melt into the shadows, the chanting grows louder, a discordant hymn that slithers through the trees. Bor doesn't need to see the source to know the truth. Some battles aren't won with steel. Some nights, survival means knowing when to walk away. Behind them, the orcs' cries turn to shrieks, then silence. The forest swallows it all, leaving only the wind to carry the echoes of what might have been. Bor's boots sink into the soft earth as he moves through camp, the weight of the night's revelations pressing heavier than chainmail. Around him, the Edain stir mothers bundling children into cloaks, warriors sharpening blades with grim focus, elders murmuring over maps lit by the dying embers of the fire. The truth hangs in the air, bitter as smoke. The orcs they evaded were just the vanguard, the first ripple of a storm gathering beyond the trees. Haleth meets him at the edge of the clearing, his face gaunt in the pre-dawn light. The scouts returned, he says, voice tight. A warband moves through the eastern pass. Hundreds, maybe more. Bor's gut twists. They've faced raids before, skirmishes in the dark. But this is a wave meant to drown them. The elders are already waiting beneath the great oak, their council fire casting long shadows. We break camp at first light, declares Garath, his knuckles white around his staff. The high moors lie beyond the river open ground, no ambushes. Murmurs of agreement rise, but Bor sees the flaw before the words leave his mouth, and when they follow, he asks, quiet as a blade slipping from its sheath, our children cannot outpace orc legs forever. Silence falls, thick as fog. The truth is a knife between them. Flight buys time, not safety. The land here is a tangle of ridges and gullies, a nightmare for an army, a blessing for defenders. But a stand means blood, means lives balanced on the edge of a spear. Bor's fingers trace the notches on his belt, each one a battle survived, a choice made. Then, from the edge of the firelight, a small hand tugs his sleeve. It's Lena, her face smudged with soot, eyes too old for her 6 winters. Will the monsters come for us? She whispers. The question hangs in the air, fragile as a spiderweb. Bor crouches, his calloused hands framing her narrow shoulders. Not while I draw breath, he says, and in that moment, the path ahead sharpens like a whetstone on steel. He rises, turning to the gathered faces. We make our stand here. The words land like stones in still water. We dig trenches, fell trees across the trails, turn this land into a thorn they cannot swallow. Garath's brow furrows, and if it fails, Bor meets his gaze unflinching. Then we die as Edain, not hunted but defiant. The fire crackles, spitting embers into the dark. Somewhere beyond the trees, the first birds begin to sing, their voices threading through the tension. like a needle through cloth. Dawn is coming, and with it, the storm. The first light of dawn paints the ridges in pale gold as Bor climbs the jagged outcrop, his fingers scraping against cold stone. Below, the camp stirs. Axes bite into timber. Children's sleepy voices rise like smoke. But up here, the wind carries only the cries of distant hawks and the scent of dew-damp earth. He scans the land with the patience of a hunter, tracing the folds of the terrain as if reading an old map. There, to the east, the glint of water, a river cutting through the hills like a silver thread. A path to safety, perhaps, if they dare it. But rivers have their own dangers, swift currents, exposed banks, and worse, things that lurk beneath the surface, waiting. A murmur drifts up from the rocks below. Bor stills, his breath fogging in the chill air. Voices, tense and low. Should have fled last night, one hisses. Now we're trapped like foxes in a den. Another snaps back. And where would we run? The moors, the wilds. Boars kept us alive this long. The words fracture into silence as someone spots his shadow above. Bor doesn't turn. The weight of their doubt is a stone in his gut, heavier than any orc blade. He descends slowly, his boots dislodging pebbles that clatter down the slope like a warning. The huddled figures scatter, warriors with downcast eyes, mothers clutching their shawls tighter. Only old Kale remains, his gnarled hands resting on his walking stick. They're frightened, he says simply. Fear makes even wise men foolish. Bor kneels beside him, pressing a handful of damp soil between his fingers. And you, he asks. Kale's laugh is dry as autumn leaves. I've followed your father into worse, but a chieftain leads with more than his spear, boy. They need to see you believe it can be done. The river glints again in the distance, a taunt or a promise. Bor rises, dusting his hands. Gather the council, he says, louder now, letting his voice carry. And bring the children forward. I'll show them the shape of our hope. The crowd parts as he strides toward the fire pit, where the morning's first flames lick at the kindling. He scoops up a charred stick and begins to draw in the dirt. A rough sketch of the land, the river's curve, the narrow defile where the hills pinch tight. Here, he says, marking a line, we funnel them, here we hold. The stick snaps in his grip, but his hand doesn't tremble. Around him, eyes widen, postures straighten. Even the doubters lean in, because a leader's true strength isn't in never fearing. It's in making the fear irrelevant. The orcs will come. The river may drown them. But today, beneath a rising sun, Bor plants his feet in the dirt and wills his people to stand beside him. The fire crackles low, casting flickering shadows across the faces gathered in the circle. Bor stands at its center, the weight of his spear balanced against his shoulder like the scales of fate itself. Around him, his people wait, mothers with arms wrapped around children, warriors gripping their weapons, elders with eyes clouded by memories of battles past. The air smells of smoke and damp wool, of unspoken fears held too long in clenched jaws. We are not rabbits to be chased into burrows. Bor begins, his voice rough but steady. Nor are we fools who rush into the wolf's jaws. He lets the words hang, watching them settle. A child sniffles, a blade scrapes against a whetstone. If we flee, they will hunt us. The high moors offer no shelter, only open sky and arrows at our backs. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Someone whispers, and if we stay, Bor's knuckles whiten around his spear, then we bleed them for every step. The simplicity of it cuts through the night. No grand promises, no lies about glory, only the hard truth of teeth and steel. A young fighter, barely more than a boy, stands abruptly. "I'd rather die standing than crawling," he declares, though his voice wavers on the last word. Others nod, but the silence that follows is thick with the things they won't say. Who will fall first? Whose voice will be the last to scream? Then the oldest among them shifts. Gareth's bones creak as he rises, his cloak dragging in the dirt like a whisper of time itself. "There is a third path," he says, and the firelight catches the silver in his beard. The elves of the green would remember our kinship. They have arrows enough to darken the sun. A ripple of unease follows. The Edain have long walked alone, proud as the mountains. To beg for aid now, Bor's gut twists. Pride is a warm cloak, but it won't stop an orc's axe. He thinks of Lena's question, of the way her small hands trembled. "How long since we traded words with the elves?" he asks, though he knows the answer. Generations, lifetimes. The old alliances are dust and half-remembered songs. Gareth's gaze doesn't waver, long enough for pride to fester, not long enough for them to forget. The unspoken truth hangs between them. The elves might turn them away. Or worse, offer help with a price no one can foresee. Bor exhales slowly, the heat of the fire pricking his skin. Survival demands more than courage. It demands swallowing the bitter draft of humility. He looks around the circle, at the faces he's sworn to protect. "Then we send runners at first light," he says at last. The words taste like ashes, but we prepare as if no help will come. Because hope is a fragile thing, and Bor has learned this lesson well. Trust in allies, but rely on your own steel. The wind moans through the trees, carrying the scent of distant rain. Somewhere beyond the camp's edge, a night bird calls 3 sharp notes, like a warning or perhaps a challenge. Bor listens, his fingers tracing the scar on his ribs again. Choices made in darkness have a way of shaping the dawn, and as the fire burns lower, he wonders which of tonight's words will echo when the sun rises. The path ahead narrows, the trees pressing close as if testing Bor's resolve. Every step takes him deeper into the greenwood, where the sunlight struggles to pierce the tangled canopy overhead. The air here is different, thick with the scent of moss and something older, something that prickles the back of his neck like a breath against his skin. His boots sink into the soft loam, silent as a hunter's, but he knows it makes no difference. They've known he was coming long before he crossed their borders. A twig snaps to his left. Bor doesn't flinch, doesn't reach for his knife. He keeps his pace steady, his palms open at his sides, a gesture of peace, though his pulse hammers against his ribs. The whispers come again, slithering between the leaves in a language just beyond understanding. Elvish, or something older still. He catches flashes of movement, a glint of silver, the flicker of a cloak. But when he turns, there's nothing. Only the forest, watching. He stops at the base of a towering oak, its roots twisting like serpents from the earth. This is as far as he's ever come, where the stories of his childhood blur into something sharper, darker. The elders spoke of this place in hushed tones, the elves' domain, where time moves like water and mortals are but fleeting shadows. Bor exhales, his breath curling in the chill. "I am Bor, son of Borthand," he calls, his voice steadier than he feels. "Chieftain of the Edain, I seek counsel with those who remember the old alliances." Silence, then a rustle above. A figure drops from the branches, landing light as a falling leaf. Tall, pale as moonlight, with eyes that hold centuries in their depths. The elf doesn't speak, doesn't blink. His gaze sweeps over Bor like a blade, testing its edge. Bor holds still, the weight of his people's survival heavy on his tongue. The moment stretches, thin as ice over a stream. Finally, the elf tilts his head. "You are far from your fires, child of men," he murmurs, the words smooth as polished stone. "And yet you walk as one who expects welcome." There's no malice in his tone, only a quiet curiosity, as if Bor is a riddle to be unraveled. Bor meets his gaze. "I come not for myself, but for those who cannot outrun the storm." He doesn't beg, doesn't bow. The Edain may be desperate, but they are not broken. The elf studies him a moment longer, then turns, his cloak whispering against the ferns. "Follow," is all he says. The forest parts before them, the underbrush shifting as if alive. Bor steps forward, the hairs on his arms rising. He's walked into tales now, into the world of his ancestors' stories. And as the shadows swallow the path behind him, he wonders if he'll ever find his way back. The elf moves like water over stone, silent, effortless, his bowstring taut, but not yet drawn. Bor doesn't flinch, though the arrow's tip glints mere inches from his throat. He's faced worse than this, the snarl of wargs, the stench of orc breath hot on his neck. Fear is a luxury he can't afford, not when his people's lives hang in the balance. The archer's eyes are pale as winter mist, unreadable as the forest itself. "State your purpose," the elf commands, his voice so soft it might have been the wind sighing through the leaves. Bor exhales slowly, his words measured. The orcs gather in the eastern pass, hundreds strong. They mean to slaughter my people before the next moon rises. He doesn't embellish, doesn't plead. The truth is sharp enough. The elf's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his gaze. Recognition, perhaps, or the shadow of an old memory. For a heartbeat, the forest holds its breath. Then, without warning, the archer lowers his bow and steps back, melting into the dappled shadows between the trees. No promise, no refusal, just silence. Bor remains rooted in place, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Was it a test? A dismissal? The rustle of leaves above might have been laughter or a warning. He turns, scanning the empty glade. No footprints mark the moss. No broken twigs betray the elf's passage. It's as if he were never here at all. Bor's jaw tightens. Time slips through his fingers like sand, and every second spent waiting is a second his people edge closer to disaster. Yet something lingers in the air. A charge, like the stillness before lightning strikes. The elves are watching. They've heard him. The question isn't whether they'll answer. It's what they'll ask in return. The mist curls like living fingers around the trunks of the ancient trees, swallowing sound, swallowing time. Bor stands motionless, his cloak damp with dew, his breath shallow as the forest holds its breath with him. Hours have bled into one another, each moment stretching thinner than the last. The hope of aid begins to fray at the edges, worn down by the creeping dread. that perhaps the elves have turned away, leaving his people to face the storm alone. Then a ripple in the fog, a glint of silver. Figures materialize from the gloom, their footfalls silent as shadows. Elven warriors, clad in armor that seems woven from moonlight and bark, their faces unreadable as the stars. At their head strides a captain, his bearing as unyielding as the mountains, his eyes twin shards of flint. He regards Boer without warmth, without malice, only the cool assessment of one weighing the worth of a bargain. They come at dawn, the elf says, his voice like wind through dry grass. The orcs, their numbers are greater than your scouts guessed. No greeting, no preamble. The words land like stones in still water. Boer doesn't flinch. Then you've seen them, he replies, matching the elf's clipped tone, which means you know what they'll do to my people if they reach the camp. The captain's gaze doesn't waver. We could turn them back, fill their throats with arrows before they crest the ridge. A pause, deliberate, but alliances are not given. They are earned. The implication hangs between them, sharp as a blade's edge. Boer's pulse thrums in his throat. He's walked enough roads to know the shape of a trap, even one gilded with promises. Name your price, he says, though the words taste like ash. The elf steps closer, the mist parting around him like a curtain. When the shadow stirs in the east again, and it will, your people fight beside us. Not as vassals, but as bound by oath. His hand drifts to the hilt of his sword, not in threat, but in emphasis. Swear this, and the greenwood's arrows fly at your side before sunrise. The weight of it presses down on Boer's shoulders, heavier than any armor, to pledge his tribe's future to the whims of immortal beings, to trade tomorrow's freedom for today's survival. His mind races, the children huddled in the camp, the mothers gripping their knives, the old men who have already buried too many. What use is freedom to the dead? Yet what becomes of a people who barter their will to another's command? The Edain have always walked their own path, even when it led through fire. Boer closes his eyes. The scent of pine fills his lungs, the whisper of the leaves a murmur of countless voices before him. His father's voice rises in his memory. A chieftain's first duty is to the living. But his legacy belongs to those not yet born. When he opens his eyes, the elf hasn't moved. The mist coils around their feet, the forest waiting. Some choices cannot be unmade. Boer straightens, his voice low but clear. We stand together in this battle, but when the shadow comes, he meets the elf's gaze, unflinching. We decide our own fate, side by side as allies, not as master and servant. A beat of silence. Then, something shifts in the captain's face, not a smile, but the barest softening at the edges of his eyes. Spoken like a true son of the Edain, he murmurs. Turning, he raises a hand. From the trees, a dozen more elves step forward, their bows gleaming. The bargain is struck. The relief is fleeting. Beyond the ridge, the first hints of dawn stain the sky. The orcs will come with the light, and Boer, he's just wagered more than his own life. The forest exhales around him, the wind carrying the distant cry of a hunting horn. No turning back now. The river bends like a drawn bow around the ridge, its dark waters whispering secrets of battles past. Boer kneels in the mud, his fingers pressing into the damp earth, as if testing its resolve. Behind him, the Edain dig trenches, fell trees into barriers, every movement urgent, precise. The elves move among them like silver shadows, their presence both comfort and unease. Their arrows are strung, their eyes fixed eastward where the sun sinks lower, staining the sky the color of old blood. A horn sounds in the distance, raw and guttural. The sound crawls up Bor's spine like ice. He rises, his spear slick in his grip. They're here. The orcs crest the ridge not as a wave, but as a flood, a seething mass of rusted armor and bared teeth. Their numbers stretch beyond the tree line, a tide of hatred rolling toward the river. Bor's throat tightens. Even with the elves, the odds are a knife's edge. He turns to his warriors, their faces pale but unbroken. Hold the line, he growls. For every child behind us, for every name we won't let them erase. The first elven arrows slice the air, hissing like vengeful spirits. Orcs drop mid-stride, their roars cut short, but the tide doesn't falter. It crashes against the makeshift barricades, splintering wood, churning mud to soup. Bor meets them at the breach, his spear a blur, thrust, twist, withdraw. The stench of orc blood fills his nose, thick and metallic. To his left, Haleth fights with a hatchet in each hand, his laughter wild as the clash of steel. To his right, an elf dances through the fray, his blade a silver streak in the dusk. An orc breaks through, its yellowed tusks dripping spit. Bor ducks its swing, feels the wind of the axe graze his temple. He drives his spear upward, the point grating against bone. The creature howls, but another takes its place, then another. The night burns with torchlight and screams, the river reflecting the chaos like a shattered mirror. Somewhere in the din, a child's cry pierces the battle roar Lena's voice, high with terror. Bor's head snaps toward the sound. A handful of orcs have slipped past the line, their jagged blades glinting as they lunge for the tents. His blood turns to fire. He tears free of the melee, his legs pumping, his vision narrowing to those small figures crouched in the dirt. The distance collapses under his boots. He reaches them as the first orc raises its axe. There's no time for technique, no room for fear. Bor throws himself forward, his shoulder slamming into the creature's ribs. They hit the ground together, rolling in the muck. The orc snarls, its claws raking his arm, but Bor's knife finds its throat. Hot blood sprays his face as he staggers up, placing himself between the monsters and the children. The world shrinks to this, the weight of his weapon, the heave of his chest, the tiny hands clutching his belt from behind. He plants his feet in the churned earth and bares his teeth. Not one step closer, he rasps. The orcs hesitate. For a heartbeat, the battle itself seems to pause, the night holding its breath. Then, a war cry splits the air. The elves surge forward, their arrows finding every gap in the orcs' ranks. The tide wavers, breaks. Bor doesn't cheer, doesn't drop his guard. He stands like a stone in the river, unmoved even as the current rages around him. The fight isn't over, but for now, for this moment, the line holds, and that's enough. A ragged scream tears through the din of battle Haleth's voice, raw with pain. Bor spins just in time to see his friend crumple, an orc's jagged blade jutting from his side. The world narrows to that single moment, the dark bloom of blood on Haleth's tunic, the way his fingers claw at the mud as he tries to rise. Bor moves without thought, his body a shield between his fallen brother and the advancing horde. An axe whistles past his ear. He barely dodges, his muscles screaming as he hooks his arms under Haleth's shoulders and heaves. Every step back is a battle. The The ground churns beneath them, slick with rain and gore. Haleth's breath comes in wet gasps, his weight dragging like an anchor. "Leave me," he rasps, but Bor's grip only tightens. Around them, the elves' arrows still fly true, each shot finding its mark, each fallen orc buying them seconds. Yet for every one that drops, 2 more scramble over the corpses, their eyes gleaming with murderous hunger. Bor's arms tremble with exhaustion. His vision blurs at the edges of his strength, fraying like a worn rope. And then, clarity. They cannot win this fight with brute force alone, not against such numbers. "Shield wall," he roars, the command ripping from his throat. "Fall back to the ridge, protect the wounded." His warriors react instantly, their discipline cutting through the chaos. Spears lower, shields interlock like the scales of some great beast. The orcs crash against the barrier, their momentum broken by the sudden resistance. For the first time since dawn, the Edain gain ground not forward, but back, step by deliberate step, carving a path to safety through sheer will. In the lull, Bor risks a glance over his shoulder. The children are being carried to higher ground, the elders shepherding them like weary geese. The elves have shifted their aim, their arrows now picking off the orcs who try to flank the retreat. It's working, but the cost is written in the faces around him. The ashen pallor of the wounded, the hollow-eyed stare of those who have seen too much. Haleth groans as Bor lowers him onto a stretch of dry grass. "Stubborn fool," he coughs, but there's no heat in it. Bor presses a wad of cloth to the wound, his hands steady despite the tremor in his breath. "You'd do the same." Beyond the shield wall, the orcs snarl and regroup. Their leader, a hulking brute with a face like split leather, barks orders, gesturing toward the river. Bor's stomach drops. They're not retreating, they're circling. The battle isn't over, it's just begun. The orcs surge forward like a storm, breaking against rocks, their howls drowning even the clash of steel. Bor braces, his shield raised once, twice, the wood groaning under each brutal strike. Then, a sickening crack. The shield splits down the middle, the force of the blow sending him sprawling backward into the mud. The world tilts, his vision swims. Above him, an orc looms, its axe glinting in the firelight as it arcs downward. Time slows. Bor's fingers scrabble for his fallen knife, but it's too far, too late. A hiss cuts the air. The orc jerks, a feathered shaft suddenly jutting from its eye. It topples like a felled tree, revealing the elven archer atop the ridge, already knocking another arrow. The tide turns in a heartbeat. The Orc Chieftain bellows, rallying his warriors until a second arrow finds his throat. The brute clutches at the wound, choking on his own blood before collapsing into the dirt. Without their leader, the orcs waver. Their snarls fade to panicked grunts. One by one, they break, scrambling into the forest like rats fleeing flame. Silence settles, heavy as a shroud. Bor drags himself upright, his ribs screaming, his hands trembling not from fear but exhaustion. Around him, the field is a tapestry of carnage, broken weapons, trampled banners, the still forms of friends and foes alike. The air reeks of iron and smoke. Haleth limps to his side, pressing a bloodied hand to his own side. "We held," he rasps. Bor doesn't answer. His gaze sweeps the battlefield, counting the gaps in the ranks. The missing laughter, the empty spaces where familiar faces should be. A child's whimper carries from the tents. Lena, alive, others not so lucky. The victory tastes of ash. The elven captain approaches, his silver armor unmarred, his expression unreadable. They will not return this night, he says. It's not comfort, it's fact. Bor nods stiffly, his throat too tight for words. The cost of survival is etched into the earth beneath his boots, into the weight of every breath. Somewhere beyond the trees, a lone wolf howls, a mournful sound that lingers in the bruised dawn light. The battle is won. The war is far from over. The first light of dawn paints the elves in silver and shadow as they gather their bows, their movements as quiet as the mist curling over the battlefield. Their captain stands apart, his face unreadable in the pale glow. Our debt is settled, he says, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. But mark this, son of the Edain. The shadow in the east grows teeth. What comes next will make today's bloodshed seem a gentle rain. The words land like stones in Bor's chest, but he doesn't flinch. He's tasted the truth of them already in the screams of the fallen, in the way the orcs fought with a desperation that spoke of whips at their backs. Bor clasps the elf's forearm, his grip firm despite the exhaustion dragging at his bones. You have our thanks, he says, simple and raw. No flowery speeches, no empty promises, just gratitude carved from the marrow of survival. The elf inclines his head, a gesture as old as the roots of the forest. Then, like ghosts at daybreak, he and his kin melt into the trees, leaving only footprints that vanish with the morning dew. Turning back to his people, Bor sees the cost etched into every face. A mother cradles her son's broken spear, her tears silent. An old warrior binds his grandson's wounds with hands that shake not from fear, but from the weight of passing the torch too soon. Yet amid the grief, something else flickers, a fire behind their eyes, a stubbornness in the set of their jaws. They met the storm and did not break. Lena tugs at his cloak, her small fingers stained with dirt and berry juice. Will the bad men come back? She asks, her voice too steady for a child who's seen what she's seen. Bor crouches, his knees popping, and brushes a smudge from her cheek. Maybe, he admits, because lies won't shield her now, but will be ready. Around them, the camp stirs to life. Axes bite into wood as new barricades rise. Healers murmur over the wounded, and the scent of roasting meat cuts through the stench of blood. The Edain are not a people who linger in despair. They bury their dead. They rebuild. They remember. Bor watches them work, his hands aching for the weight of a tool instead of a weapon. The elves' warning echoes in his skull, but here, now, there is bread to bake and wounds to bind and stories to tell around the fire. The trials ahead can wait for twilight. Today, they are alive, and that, for now, is enough. The pyres burn low, their embers glowing like fallen stars in the gathering dusk. Bor walks among them, his shadow stretching long across the trampled earth, as he presses a hand to each mound of freshly turned soil. Gareth, son of Malor, he murmurs to the first, his voice rough with smoke and memory. Your axe saved 3 children at the ford. The wind carries the name away, scattering it like seeds over the land the dead had loved. One by one, he speaks them all, the warriors, the hunters, the grandmother who died shielding a babe with her own body. No one is forgotten, not here. Haleth lies propped against a mossy stone, his face gray as storm clouds, but his eyes alert. Blood-soaked bandages wrap his middle, yet his grip is firm when Bor crouches beside him. Should have been me in that dirt, Haleth rasps, nodding toward the graves. Bor shakes his head, pressing a water skin to his friend's lips. The world isn't done with your stubbornness yet. The joke falls flat, but Haleth's chuckle is worth the ache in Bor's ribs. Around them, the camp hums with quiet industry. Women grind herbs for poultices, their songs softer than usual, threaded through with grief. Children stack firewood with solemn focus, their playfulness dimmed by the understanding of what these flames will feed. Even the wind seems gentler tonight, as if nature itself hesitates to disturb the fragile peace. Bor's fingers brush the amulet at his throat, a worn piece of antler carved with his father's mark. Leadership had always been a weight before, something to shoulder like a sack of stones. But as he watches a young mother place wildflowers on a grave, as he feels Haleth's calloused hand squeeze his wrist in silent thanks, the weight shifts. It settles not on his shoulders, but around his heart. This is not duty. This is kinship, as deep and unshakable as the roots of the mountains. He rises, his knees protesting, and turns toward the largest pyre where the elves had laid their own fallen. Their songs still linger in the air, melodies too ancient for mortal tongues to echo. Bor bows his head, not in submission, but in recognition. Allies. Perhaps in time, even friends. The last ember fades as the moon climbs. Somewhere beyond the trees, a nightingale begins its lament, a single, soaring note that trembles in the dark. Bor closes his eyes and listens. The dead are honored, the living endure, and tomorrow will demand what it always does: courage, cunning, and the will to keep standing when the earth itself seems to shake. But for now, there is this, the breath in his lungs, the warmth of the fire, the unbroken circle of his people, gathered close against the night. The river murmurs beside them, its waters wide and steady as the Edain move along its banks, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. Bor walks at the heart of the column, his spear slung across his back, his ears tuned to the quiet conversations weaving through the group. A young mother murmurs to her sister about the ache in her legs. An old hunter grumbles about the stiffness in his joints. These are not complaints, they are confessions, whispered like prayers into the morning air. Bor slows his pace until he falls in beside them, his shoulder brushing against theirs. My knees creak like an old door hinge, he admits, rubbing at the scar on his thigh. The hunter barks a laugh, and suddenly the weariness feels lighter, shared. Lena skips ahead, her bare feet kicking up dew from the grass. She pauses to glance back at Bor, her eyes no longer wide with fear, but bright with something fiercer curiosity, maybe, or the first flicker of trust. Will there be more monsters where we're going? She asks, blunt as only a child can be. Bor doesn't lie. Maybe, he says, crouching to her level. But there will also be berries sweeter than honey, and streams full of fish, and caves where the bats sing at dusk. Her nose wrinkles. Bats are creepy. He grins. They eat the mosquitoes that bite your toes. That wins a giggle, and she darts off again, her laughter trailing behind her like a ribbon in the wind. Night finds them in a sheltered grove, the river's song a lullaby beneath the stars. The fire crackles, casting long shadows as the elders pass a skin of spiced wine. Bor takes a sip, then another, before passing it on. I dreamed last night, he says, his voice low, of the first time I led a hunt, got turned around in a storm, led us straight into a bear's den. The circle goes quiet. My father had to drag me out by my collar, and I spent the next moon mending every spear I'd broken. He shakes his head. I thought they'd never follow me again. Gareth leans forward, the firelight carving deep grooves into his face. And yet here you are. The words hang in the air, warm as the flames between them. Bor looks around at the faces watching him, not with the blind faith of followers, but with the steady gaze of those who have chosen to walk beside him, scars and all. The realization settles into his bones like sunlight after rain. Leadership isn't carved from stone or shouted from hilltops. It's built in the quiet spaces between words, in the sharing of fears and the tending of blisters, in the way a child's hand finds yours when the path grows dark. He pokes at the embers, sending up a swirl of sparks. Tomorrow will bring its own trials. The river may rise, the game may be scarce. But tonight, there is only this, the fire, the stories, and the unspoken promise that no one walks alone. The valley stretches before them like a promise, its rolling hills blanketed in wildflowers, and the distant murmur of a clear stream weaving through the grass. Weeks of travel have brought them here, to a land where the soil is rich enough to cradle seeds, where the trees bear fruit instead of thorns. Bor stands atop a sun-warmed boulder, watching his people scatter across the meadow like birds returning to nest. Axes bite into timber as the first huts take shape. Children's laughter rings out as they chase frogs along the water's edge. The scent of rosemary and thyme rises from the earth where the women kneel, their fingers pressing green shoots into the dark loam. Life, stubborn and hopeful, taking root again. A hand touches his elbow. Gareth, his face more lined than before, but his eyes bright. The council awaits, he says, nodding toward the great oak at the valley's heart. Beneath its branches, the elders sit in a loose circle, their faces turned toward Bor with a quiet intensity that makes his pulse quicken. He follows, his boots leaving faint impressions in the dew-heavy grass. The oldest among them, a woman with hair like spun silver and hands gnarled as the oak's roots, rises slowly. Bor, son of Bordhand, she begins, her voice carrying the weight of generations. You led us through fire and steel. You bore our grief as your own. She lifts a circlet of braided willow and rowan berries, simple, unadorned, yet heavier than any crown of gold. We name you not only chieftain now, but Arranthir, guardian of the Edain's tomorrows. The title hangs in the air, thick as honey. Bor's throat tightens. He thinks of the graves they left behind, of the faces around the fire last night. New lines etched by loss, but also a hardness forged in survival. This is no victory celebration. It's an oath, writ in the language of bark and berry. He bows his head, letting the elder place the circlet upon his brow. The leaves brush his skin, cool and alive. I will carry it, he murmurs, until my bones return to this earth. A cheer rises, but it's the silence afterward that lingers, the unspoken understanding that guardianship is not glory. It's the blisters on his palms, from helping raise the first palisade. It's the nights he'll spend walking the perimeter, listening for threats beyond the firelight. It's the weight of every decision yet to come, each one shaping lives like river stones, smoothed over time. Later, as the first hearth fires paint the valley in amber, Bor walks the fledgling paths between the huts. Lena darts past, a wooden sword in her grip, pretending to slay invisible foes. An old weaver hums as she stitches a banner, a green sapling rising from a field of stars, their new sigil. The sounds weave together, a tapestry of ordinary miracles. He pauses at the edge of the settlement, where the wildlands begin. Somewhere beyond those trees, the world still turns allies and enemies, storms and seasons. But here, for now, there is shelter, there is breath, there is time. Bor closes his eyes, letting the wind carry the scent of hearth smoke and turned soil. The road ahead is long, but tonight, beneath a sky freckled with stars, it's enough to stand still and let the earth remember his name. The scout stumbles into camp with mud, caked to his knees and terror, etched into the lines of his face. His breath comes in ragged gasps as he collapses before Bor, his fingers clenched around a scrap of tattered parchment. The ink is smudged, the edges charred as if snatched from a fire, but the words are clear enough. Shadows gather beyond the misty mountains. A nameless dread stirs in the ruins of Angmar. The air thickens with the unspoken truth. This is no mere warband. This is the first breath of a storm that could swallow the world. Bor's hands don't tremble as he passes the parchment to Garath. Around him, the camp falls silent. The children pause their games, sensing the shift in the wind. The elders exchange glances heavy with memory. They've run before from orcs, from hunger, from the slow creep of despair. But this darkness has no borders, no river wide enough to cross, no mountain high enough to climb. He climbs onto the great oak's roots, the bark rough beneath his palms. His warriors gather first, their faces hard as flint, but soon the entire tribe presses close, mothers with babes on their hips, gray-bearded hunters, even the littlest ones peering between legs. Bor doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. You've seen the signs, he says, his voice carrying like a blade unsheathed. The withered crops, the dreams that leave you gasping. The way the wolves no longer howl at night. A murmur ripples through the crowd. They know. Haleth steps forward, his old wound long healed, but the memory of it fresh in his grimace. We could turn south, he offers, though his tone betrays his doubt. Lose ourselves in the wilds beyond Gondor. A young mother scoffs, bouncing her son on her hip. And then what? Live like rabbits in a hole until the shadow finds us anyway. Her words land like a slap. Bor sees it, then the fire in their eyes, the set of their jaws. They are tired of fleeing. Lena, no longer a child, but not yet a woman, pushes to the front. Her hands are stained with berry juice, her braids frayed from wind and work. She says nothing, just stares up at Bor with eyes too old for her face. In them, he sees the question they're all too afraid to voice. What if we're not strong enough? Bor exhales, the weight of his circlet suddenly heavy. The elves spoke true, he admits. This war will not end with us, but neither will our story. He sweeps a hand toward the valley, the huts they built with blistered hands, the fields they coaxed from stubborn earth, the graves they dug for those who won't see the spring. This is our home, not because some king granted it, but because our sweat and blood sanctified it. The silence stretches, taut as a bowstring. Then from the back, a single voice rises. An old weaver, her hands knotted with arthritis, but her voice clear as a bell. I'll not run again. Another joins her, then another. The chorus swells, not in a roar, but in a low, rolling thunder of defiance. A hunter slams his spear against his shield. A potter raises a fist. Even the children stamp their feet, too young to understand death, but old enough to recognize courage. Bor's throat tightens. This is no blind rush to glory. It's a choice, deliberate as a seed pressed into soil. They'll fight, not for victory, perhaps, but for the right to say they stood. He meets Haleth's gaze, sees the grudging pride there, and nods. The time for hiding is over. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of rain from the east. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the shadow stirs. But here, beneath the oak's sheltering branches, the Edain lift their voices in a song older than fear, a hymn of roots and resistance, of hands joined against the gathering dark. The fire crackles low, its embers pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. Bor leans back against the weathered oak, the willow circlet cool against his brow. Around him, the village sleeps, huts hushed, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the stream. He stretches his legs toward the warmth, the scars on his calves silvered by firelight. Months ago, these marks were fresh wounds, badges of survival. Now they're just part of the story. His story, woven into the larger tapestry of his people. A gust stirs the pine boughs overhead, showering needles that land like whispers on his shoulders. He catches one, rolling it between thumb and forefinger. Fragile, yet sharp enough to draw blood if gripped too tight. A fitting emblem for the days ahead. The scout's warning still echoes in his bones, shadows in the east, whispers of a power old as the hills. But tonight, for the first time since donning the mantle of Arranthir, the weight doesn't crush him, it anchors him. To his left, Haleth snores against a log, his bandaged hand curled around an empty cup. Beyond him, Lena's hut glows faintly. She's awake, likely sketching battle plans in the dirt with a stick, her young mind already spinning strategies. Bor chuckles. The elders fret about her recklessness, but he sees what they don't. The same fire that once burned in him, tempered now by hard-won wisdom. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent as ever. Bor traces the constellations his father taught him, the hunter, the plow, the serpent coiling around the northern sky. Legends say the Edain were born under these same stars, their fates written in their glow. Maybe so, but as the firelight flickers across the freshly carved palisade, the stacked grain sacks, the children's laughter still clinging to the air like pollen, Bor knows this truth. Destiny isn't etched in the heavens. It's forged here, in the dirt and the sweat, and the choices made around fires just like this one. A twig snaps. Garroth limps into the light, his joints protesting the night chill. Without a word, he settles beside Bor, pressing a clay cup into his hand. The mead inside is bitter, brewed from the first harvest of their new home. They drink in silence, the past and future balance between them. Out in the dark, an owl calls 3 notes, clear as a blade striking stone. Bor tilts his head, listening. Not an omen, just a bird, just the world turning as it always has. He closes his eyes, letting the fire's warmth seep into his bones. Dawn will come soon enough, with its burdens and its battles. But tonight, there is only the steady breath of his people, the stars keeping watch, and the unshakable certainty that whatever storms gather on the horizon, they won't face them alone.